Hey everyone, it's Maya. It is 1:15, so as I posted before, I'm going to be diving into a little bit more of the fight versus float concept that I talked about in my recent blog post. So let's just jump in. If this is something that makes sense to you, awesome. I'm hoping that this will help you just connect to it a little bit more deeply and figure out ways to embody it, ways to explore it a little bit more. So I talked about fight being what a lot of people, and particularly a lot of women, are used to doing, and it becomes habitual. We don't really notice it. So this idea of like, if to make it through this transition, I'm going to power through. You might have different words other than fight. I'm going to power through. I can't stop. I'll rest when I'm done. All of these kind of mindsets and language around what it means to be fighting, what it means to be pushing through. And look, the reality is that sometimes we need to, put on our big girl pants. I kind of hate that phrase, but sometimes we need to just do what has to be done. But the problem is when we're asked to do that so often, it becomes all we know. We can't just stay with that. We can't take off our big girl pants or big girl shoes or cowboy boots or whatever phrase you like. So it becomes just what we wear all the time. So fighting becomes so normal, so natural, so habitual that we don't know how to do anything else. And it only becomes a problem when it gets hard enough that we really notice that we're exhausted, that we're struggling, that little things are taking so long, or that the aches and pains are there, or that everything feels like a struggle, whether it's little interactions in your relationship, whether it's deciding, decisions that are not huge, things like that. So fighting is what comes naturally to so many of us. And I just want to put forth the idea that we don't always have to fight. And if you're not sure if you're a fighter, it probably means you are. And that's okay. It's something that I know really deeply and intimately myself. But to be curious about it, like even when I say the word fight or when I make this fist, what are you aware of? What is showing up in your body? Just take a minute and tune in. Like, what does it mean to fight? What's going on in your breath? Do you feel like kind of you're steeling yourself, you're ready, there's someone pushing you from behind, whether that's you or someone else? I know when I go like that, I feel like almost this invisible hand right between my shoulder blades, just pushing me. And so floating, literally, hang on, let's come back to fighting for one sec. So when I work with clients around this, we might just explore the fighting or that concept. When does it show up? Where did you first learn this? How does it manifest? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? So oftentimes, if I ask clients to choose an instrument that in some way represents the fighting, it might be the drum. That's not a hard and fast rule, but it might be. And I might ask them to play, like, what does it feel like to fight? So just in this moment, I'm going to improvise what it feels like to fight, to have that invisible hand between my shoulder blades. Something like this. So it's hard, it's a little piercing, you feel it, but it doesn't really have any rounded edges to it, if that makes sense. Again, there's nothing wrong with drums. I love drums. We all need rhythm, but this is about how it feels and how it's settling in the body. So let's move to floating. So in the blog post, I talked about this idea of floating as being held in what's already there. And you could think about when you learned how to float, when you were learning how to swim as a kid. If you struggle too hard, you won't stay up. If you think about it too much, you won't stay up. It is just one of those things that, the water will hold you if you let the water hold you. Just breathe that in for a moment. The water will hold you if you let the water hold you, literally. And so floating is about resting, being held in what's already there, but it's not about checking out. right? It's about, so come back to this idea of floating in water. You have to have just some light awareness. Last night in restorative yoga, my yoga teacher was talking about butterfly light awareness, and I love that phrase. So having this really light awareness that you're still there, an awareness of your entire body, of the ripples of the water underneath you. So you're not completely checked out, but you're not actively swimming, you're not actively trying to get somewhere, you're not actively doing anything, except being present, being in the present moment, being held with what is. And so I just noticed that I needed to take a really big sigh and just to exhale that. That's a huge shift, you know. If I check in with my body, and I invite you to do the same, if I check in with my body, it feels a little looser. There's breath moving up and down my back. So I work a lot with the breath. As a music therapist, I work a lot with rhythm, with the breath, and our awareness of it. And so when I have a client who's struggling with this idea of not doing something, we might just play around with the breath and notice like how little effort you need to breathe. How little effort, with some people, how little effort is needed to make a sound on the drum. So to bring the drum back in for a moment, the drum can also connect us to floating. It's all about in how you do it. Sometimes I'll ask clients to notice like how much effort you're putting in your hand. And is that really needed to make a sound? I can make a sound with just one finger, like this. It requires very little effort. So there's a way to float in that rhythm. Other ways to explore floating, you might actually go swimming and float. Remember what that feels like if you don't swim often. I know I don't. So if you don't swim often, just reminding your body of what that's like, or relaxing into Shavasana at the end of a yoga class. For me, restorative yoga helps me just be held in being aware enough, but not efforting, not fighting, not doing, letting my body, my mind, my muscles just relax. It takes, ironically, a lot of work to be able to learn how to do that. Once you learn it, it comes a lot more easily. It really does. So that's a lot of just diving right into the fighting, the floating. If this resonates at all with you, I would love to hear comments, questions. I would love if this resonates with you in terms of what you're looking for in an approach to therapy. I would love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out. And I just want to wrap up this Facebook Live conversation with a moment of just coming back to the breath. And this is something that I'll often ask clients to do. But our breath gives us so much information. And when we're thinking about this concept of fighting versus floating, we need information from our bodies. We need to not be just in our minds. And what happens sometimes when we're fighting, we get stuck up here. And that's why I love the work I do with music, with the creative process, with mindfulness, that it helps people literally come back down into their bodies. And that can be a scary thing. It can be an overwhelming thing, but it's what we actually crave. It's what we need to make real connections with ourselves and with other people. So just taking a moment, taking a breath, wherever you might be when you're watching this. And as I was preparing for this, I was looking around the office and trying to find an instrument that in some way connects with the idea of floating. And there are so many in here. And for me and for my clients, it changes on the day-to-day basis. I don't believe that, if one instrument connects you with an idea or feeling, that it always has to be that. So for myself, at this moment, I chose the singing bowl. And I just like to close by playing it for you and just letting you experience what I think is a pretty close musical approximation of floating. The sound just vibrates and reverberates and resonates until it's done. So just letting yourself breathe into that as you listen. So if that sound touched you in some way, if that resonated with you, just taking a moment, breathing it in, keeping it with you. I welcome your comments, your questions, your musings about this whole fight versus float continuum, paradox, life question in the comments. And thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.